Welcome to the Unlocking Senior Resources podcast by Leave the Key. I'm Larry Wagner, and I've spent 30 years working with seniors where I was a certified senior advisor and the last 15 years in the home buying industry as a certified senior transition specialist, where I specialize in dealing with seniors going through a transition in their lives. This podcast is for seniors, those with seniors they love, and people who work in the senior community. In each episode, we bring on a guest who works to improve the lives of seniors. This podcast is your key to unlocking senior resources. Welcome. Today we're here with Deanna Eble from Russo Law. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Very well, thank you. So you're an attorney with a long-term law firm.
Yes, we just celebrated our 40th anniversary.
That's a long time.
It is.
So with that said, I have a question. How did you become an attorney?
So growing up, I was always telling people that I wanted to be a lawyer. And I got into this area of law because while I was an undergrad and a law student, I was working in a nursing home out in West Hampton.
Mm-hmm. Almost Hampton.
And it gives a little bit of a nuance for me because I have that opportunity that not only do I know how to deal with things from a legal standpoint, I know what the families are going through on the other side of it.
You know, the emotional side of what you do.
Yeah. I mean, when I worked in the nursing home, I was an hourly worker, so I did whatever I could to make an extra dollar, and I would sit at reception and do data entry in the nursing office and stuff like that. So I got to talk to families and residents and just know their stories, why they're there, what's going on in their world. And so when I sit with clients, I have that perspective where I can connect with them on a different level and really have a conversation. This is what you need to do, and this is why you need to do it. And a lot of people, when you're talking nursing home, they resent the fact that their family member has to be there, or they're not happy that their family member has to be there. And I just come at it from a different perspective. And also that concept of go visit your family member at different times a day. They're not ready for you to come in at different times a day. If you say I'm coming at 10 o'clock every day, your family member will be ready at 10 o'clock every day.
Nice, dressed and groomed.
Yes. And people ask me often, what's the best nursing home? And really the answer isn't a generic, it's this facility. It's wherever the family can go pop in the middle of a lunch break from work, or they live close to them. It's wherever you can pop in for a few minutes, 15, 20 minutes throughout the day as a family, interact with your loved one. That's the best nursing home.
So this is not a legal discussion.
No.
This is a human discussion.
There's a human side to this whole thing. It's not just numbers and on a ledger. It's the human side of it, because we're dealing with human beings and their lifestyle, and they're changing what they're used to. And, one of the biggest things is when people go into facilities, if that's their end result, is they go into those facilities and they have structure that they're not necessarily dealing with at home. You're told when to eat, you're told when to shower, you're told when to go to bed. And it's an adjustment. It's an adjustment for everybody.
Absolutely. My folks were in independent living, not a nursing home, but my grandmother was a nursing home, and exactly what you're talking about. But it's not the facility that makes the difference. It's the people in the facility that makes the difference.
100%.
If you have a crystal chandelier in the lobby, who cares?
100%.
Are the people taking care of mom and dad nicely and with compassion? So it's funny, the topic we're going to talk about today was, I want to get it properly, phrase it properly. We said...
so it's planning for Medicaid without going broke.
I remember planning for Medicaid. So without going broke, and that's the attorney side, the accounting side, but here we're starting with the human side, which is such the most important part.
It's the most important part. It's the thing people struggle with the most, because as I always tell clients, we plan for the worst and expect the best. Right. The best scenario is always that your family member is able to stay home in their surroundings and just live with extra assistance. And there's sometimes a transition, a step down to assisted living or other scenarios. But nursing home is the usually,
Yeah.
except for rehab, nursing home is usually like a last resort for most people. And unfortunately, because of social media and the news, we think they're the worst things in the world. But having worked there, I can tell you there are aides that absolutely love your family member and treat your family member with the respect as if they're their own. And not enough people know that.
My mother had an aide. She was in independent living. I mentioned this numerous times on this podcast. She had Lewy body dementia after being there for about 2 or 3 years. And she spent 3 years basically as a vegetable in a wheelchair. And her aide met her with Lewy body dementia. She only knows my mother as a cripple with gnarled hands and unable to speak or do anything. And she had loved my mother.
Yep.
Matter of fact, my mother died. She called me in tears. I had to go and console my aide, my mother's aide. She didn't have to console me. I was happy at this point. Mother was at peace. But the aide was so distraught because she loved my mother.
They get attached.
They really do. And to have an aide who can get attached to, in essence, a vegetable, my mother was a wonderful human being, but she didn't get to know my mother's essence. But she seemed to have gotten, I don't know how. And those are the people, forget the crystal chandelier, forget the quality of the food. She's the one who made the difference.
Absolutely.
And shout out to Savvy. So she was unbelievable. We still keep in touch.
That's great. I love those kinds of stories because that's somebody who really loves their job and respects the people that they're working with.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I love that.
So, but let's talk about what you do. First of all, so you were talking about how you got here, and you worked in the nursing home, and you wanted to be a lawyer, and you sort of ended up in this end of the law. How'd you get to Russo?
So I was working at a small mom and pop firm for the first 7 years that I was practicing, and a position opened up here. I'm here 17 years now, and it's just the right fit. It is an office where Vincent himself is such a phenomenal teacher, and he is willing to impart his knowledge across the board and always available to answer questions and participate in the conversations with the clients and just guide us and teach us everything that he's learned over these years, and encourage us to grow and be better attorneys. And it was just such a great fit that I mean,
17 years is a long time.
Years.
You're not going anywhere.
I'm not going anywhere.
Okay. We'll have another discussion when you celebrate your 20th anniversary.
All right. That's great. Go. I love that.
Okay. So let's talk about Medicaid.
Yes.
And what are the steps to planning for Medicaid without going broke? Because that's everyone's biggest fear, that the government's going to take my money.
Yeah.
First of all, that's not really true.
It's not true. It's not true. So at the end of the day, the two fears are, one, like you said, the government's going to take your money, and two, that the nursing home is going to own your house.
Right.
I trust and believe the nursing home doesn't want to be in the market of owning houses. No. It's enough of a headache for the average person to own a house, right? They
Especially on Long Island with the taxes.
Taxes and maintenance and all that. So at the end of the day, the best thing that you can do is plan in advance, which is not always easy. It's you need a crystal ball in some respects, but if you at least start planning in advance, I relate it to most clients are of the senior population, so many of them have grandchildren. And I often say to them, 5 years, we talk 5 years because if you go into a nursing home, Medicaid, being they, does an audit of your assets over the 5 years prior to your entrance into a nursing home to determine whether or not you're eligible for services.
Right.
And I'll explain more about that audit in a second. But I often...
Not an audit like an IRS audit. Don't get nervous.
No,
you didn't do anything wrong.
Exactly.
People hear audit, they get nervous.
So what happens is, when you think in terms of 5 years, it sounds like a long time, but if you think in terms of your grandchildren and how fast they grew up, 5 years just flies by. Yeah. It's like you snap your fingers and you're through the 5 years. The easiest thing, I think, you mentioned on Long Island with taxes and stuff like that, the median population tends to be house rich and cash poor. Yep. So our biggest asset is our house. So oftentimes what the comfort is I want to protect my house so that at least my family can get that. At least my family has that. I worked so hard for it.
The American dream, I don't want to lose it.
Yeah. Right. So A house is often the easiest thing to plan for because conceptually you can almost set it and forget it kind of thing. When you're planning to protect a house, you can use something called an irrevocable trust, or often in the industry, it's a Medicaid asset protection trust. They're one and the same.
Right. It's semantics. It's marketing, if you will.
It's marketing.
Yeah.
And so when you take your house and have the trust own it, commonly elder law attorneys will put language in the trust that says, okay, you don't own the house anymore. The trust owns the house, but you have the right to live there. You have the exclusive right to live there. You can use it, possess it, occupy it, maintain your benefits for any real estate tax exemptions like veterans or senior star exemptions, enhanced star. And in doing that, you really aren't changing your day-to-day.
Correct. And locking up your assets is one thing. Locking up your house doesn't mean anything to you.
Right, because at the end of the day, other than maybe the occasional tax bill, you're not getting anything in the mail saying you don't own it.
Right.
You are still paying the taxes. You're still paying the maintenance, the upkeep. The lawn is still your responsibility. Right. All of those things still happen. So you're not noticing it as much, which makes it easier to deal with the 5 years. Yep. So I often get the question, well, my neighbor did a life estate deed. Isn't that better? Right. Can I do that? Then my name is still on the deed. And I when I get that question, I will refer to a client that I had, it's probably 15 years ago now, maybe longer, where mom and dad didn't want to incur the costs of doing a deed transfer into a trust. So they did the life estate deed because it was cheaper. They had a few kids. The kids went on the deed. And when the kids went on the deed, mom and dad had the right to live in the house. They were on the deed as life estate holders. And unfortunately, one of the kids died before mom and dad. And
I haven't heard this. I'm curious where this goes.
The daughter-in-law of that son, she sought her right to get his share of the property. So essentially, she sued the in-laws for the 1/3 interest that her husband was entitled to because that was his right. And it forced mom and dad to have to take the house that they were living in. It's their house. They're still alive. It's still the roof over their head. Right. They had to go out and get a mortgage to pay off the daughter-in-law. And
I'll say ex-daughter-in-law at this point.
Ex-daughter-in-law. It created not only a burden because there was this expense that mom and dad had, but you're right. It could create a lot of animosity with the daughter-in-law. And if there are grandchildren, now there might be a rift between them and they don't get to see their grandchildren. It might be the cheaper upfront, but the cost that was involved in that, especially losing the opportunity to be with your grandchildren for their life now, is much, much more expensive.
Classic penny wise, pound foolish.
Yes.
But I have a question for you. First of all, I didn't know that being on the deed with a life estate allowed them to extract their equity in the house. I don't think it would.
They own the property.
But I thought with the life estate, they couldn't.
The life estate has a value based on the life estate holder's age. So if you and I owned a property, I had a life estate, you were the owner of it, and we agreed in my lifetime that we were going to sell the property, you would not get 100% of the proceeds, nor would I. I would get a percentage based on my age. And then you would get the difference.
How much time they think you have statistically left in the house.
Correct.
I got it.
And so that is another issue when somebody is presenting that as, oh, well, isn't this a cheaper option? You also have to understand there's a couple of reasons why I would discourage somebody from using a life estate deed. We talk about not going broke, but when we talk about Medicaid planning, even though you can do a life estate deed, the concerns I have is, one, this son was on the deed, and what happens if something happens to him? Two, what if what if nobody passed, but one of the children had a creditor problem, like they got sued for something, they got into a car accident, they got sued. You're exposing that asset because technically, like I gave you in the example of you and I owning the property,
Yep.
you have a percentage that you own in your lifetime that somebody could technically make a claim against. It's not subject to divorce, but that doesn't mean a spouse, an ex-spouse might use it as might not use it as leverage for something. Yeah. And the biggest reason why I discouraged the life estate deed is because in the example where you and I owned a house and I had the life estate, if I go into a nursing home, for example, and you want to sell the house because you can't maintain taxes, like we were joking at the beginning, you can't maintain taxes on Long Island for 2 properties, let alone all the other expenses. When you sell that house with my permission, I might have an opportunity to get credits against the increased value on the house, which is a capital gain value. Mm-hmm. You, if you don't live in that house, you don't get credit for the increased value in that. You don't get a credit against the increased value. You pay a capital gains tax.
It's not my primary residence. I lose a $250,000 exclusion. Correct. Also, I have a question. When you put into a life estate, is there a loss of step up in basis?
There's not a loss of step up in basis if I pass owning the property because I had the life estate. Then you inherit that. So
even though I'm on the deed,
even though you're on the deed,
as long as you pass while owning it. And then if it was sold during you now go to a nursing home, you decide you want the house sold. So the 3 kids who are on the deed sell the house.
If it's sold in my lifetime and I had a life estate on the deed, there is no increase in step up in basis because you didn't inherit it from me.
Correct.
Which is why it's better to have one of those Medicaid Asset Protection Trusts. Because the Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, you're using my whole $250,000 credit against the sale if you sell it when I go into a nursing home. You don't have to hold the house if I go into a nursing home.
That's huge. That's huge. Because even the other story was very powerful. My mind wouldn't have gone there. I didn't know they had the right to extract their equity. But I always wondered about the step up, and I've asked this before, but that's a very interesting point. It matters if you pass or it's sold during your lifetime. So that's a good enough reason in itself.
I agree. And you know how many times I'm doing this 24 years. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, no, we're going to do the life estate deed. We're not going to sell it in mom and dad's lifetime. And then, 10 years later, they come to me looking to sell it and get frustrated over that capital gain.
And then clients say, you should have told me. And you sit there and say, 8 years ago, I had a whole dialogue.
Yeah. We usually make sure it's in writing also because it's important.
That's smart. Put it in writing. Because they're going to come back and say you never told them because they remember what they want to remember.
Yeah.
I've been there, done that.
So when we're talking about Medicaid planning and not going broke, putting the house in the trust, it is one of those things that gives you multiple opportunity for protections because not only is it helping to protect the house from long-term care costs like Medicaid, whether it's home care or nursing home care, it has that protection. It also is an opportunity for the assets owned by the Medicaid Asset Protection Trust to not go through probate. So you don't, on your passing, the surrogates court doesn't get involved. There's no court fees. There's no fees for the estate proceeding and all of that. And in a case where maybe there's a family is estranged or they don't all live locally, it makes it much easier to deal with. So
we're dealing with a house we're buying in Brooklyn.
Right.
And we signed the contract to buy this house from a gentleman who owned the house with his mother. And mom died. He let his brother live in the house. His brother died. Now he's finally selling the house. He owned most of it. His mom owned a little bit of it. He can't sell it to me till we settle his mom's estate, who died now 13 years ago. And the reason I say 13 years ago is it's been probate court for 3 years. So you don't want, he could have sold it. It's over $1 million going in his pocket. And he's waiting and waiting for 3 years on this money.
Exactly. And there was no greater opportunity to recognize that problem than COVID.
Yeah.
Because when COVID happened and people unfortunately were passing in mass numbers, the courts were hybrid.
Yeah.
So they weren't working at their fullest. They
Right.
were like a 50% rate.
Right.
And you had an influx of surrogates court proceedings because of probate petitions or administrations.
Yeah.
And the workforce was lower. And so things that normally would have taken 6 months to a year are taking 2 to 3 years. They're still catching up from COVID.
Oh, this was a nightmare. I won't go into the details, not important, but again, it's 3 years and about 7 or 8 months. Now the last 7 or 8 months are on the family, but they still haven't sold the house.
So had it been in a trust,
Yeah.
the trustee of the trust could have easily just, I joke because you have to have a little bit of a sense of humor when you're dealing with death and dying every day, or
Yes.
really severe illness.
Mm-hmm.
But I always joke with clients that, at the end of the day, you could theoretically go into contract to sell the house at the funeral, and that because you're trustee of the trust, that's allowed. You could do that.
Right.
Helps to cut back on certain things. It also helps when you're probating an asset, going through the courts to actually have permission to sell it, which is what a will is. When people say, I need a will, the will is that document that the courts then look at in a probate proceeding to get permission to name somebody and move forward. Yeah. And what people don't realize is probate proceedings, there's particular notice requirements. So mom and dad may not have talked to a child for a decade and noted in their documents that child is not getting anything, but a probate proceeding requires that child get notice of that proceeding.
And where is that child?
Right. And it gives them an opportunity and a date and time they could come in and make an argument.
Right.
Trusts don't work that way. There's no notice requirement. It's not impossible, but it's much harder to get into the courts with a trust than it is with probate.
Right. In this case, the brother who passed had multiple children without a wife.
They need to get.
And we had to now locate all those. We didn't know how many there were, let alone where they live, or their names or anything else. We had to hire a separate company at a large expense to locate them. We think all of them, and they all had to be located and notified. And it's a lot of work. If there's a trust, we wouldn't have gone through any of this. He would have had his money 3 years ago.
I agree.
Yeah.
But so when we're talking about Medicaid and planning in advance, you can also put cash in a Medicaid asset protection trust. The thing that people need to think about when they're putting cash into an irrevocable trust is just, do I touch that money on a regular basis? Do I touch that account on a regular basis? And if I don't have that money directly available to me, will it affect me? And that's a question they have to ask themselves and really wrap their head around. Because the cash that goes into an irrevocable trust is not cash that's available to them. So you can't put money into an irrevocable trust and then go to the bank yourself and take that money out. And the trustee that you named cannot go to the bank and take that money out for your benefit or give it to you.
Right.
So you have to, like I said, a house is easy because a house is, you're still living in it, you don't feel it. The cash is a little bit different. Not to say you shouldn't do that with cash. Plenty of people have rainy day funds.
Right.
And the more you put in the irrevocable trust, obviously, the more you're protecting. And so I often have conversation with people where, there's this concept that, why are you recommending trusts? Why are you having people shelter their money? They should be spending their money on the care and stuff like that. But the best thing I could tell you is that when somebody takes money and puts it in an irrevocable trust, you give the family an opportunity to protect those assets. And when you protect those assets, it is an opportunity then where if you needed a little bit more one-on-one care, your kids understand that at some point they have money that they'll be inheriting because it's protected, that if they had to use some of their funds to help get you one-on-one care, if they know at some point they can get reimbursed from an inheritance or something, then they're more likely to do that than if if it's just taking the money out of my pocket and it, like it might be my kids' money that I had set aside, hoping that someday they would go to school or something like that. So you're giving your family an opportunity to have money set aside that if you needed a little bit more one-on-one attention, they have more opportunity and available to give you that. So it's not always we're protecting things for a nursing home. We talk in terms of 5 years because nursing home is your worst case scenario, but you also want to protect assets for your long-term care, which is home care or independent living. Not a lot of assisted livings, but there are a handful of assisted livings on Long Island that accept community Medicaid as a paying source.
I didn't know that.
Yes. They are slowly starting to pop up more and more. Because if you think in terms of the generations that are aging now, we're all aging, but the senior
aging into that. Okay, good.
The senior population is becoming more of the predominantly baby boomer generation.
Me.
And because that population is such a large population that you're seeing more and more institutions like an assisted living start to consider, we call it the ALP program. It's the assisted living program through Medicaid. So they may not take their entire facility and make it a Medicaid facility, but they are starting to consider more and more the opportunity of taking maybe 20 beds or 40 beds and carving them out so that somebody who might have been living there for some number of years doesn't necessarily have to place out into a nursing home because they ran out of money. They may be able to, if their care needs are the same, they may be able to stay and have Medicaid pay for their care.
It's cheaper for Medicaid to pay for their care there than probably
it can be. Yeah, it definitely can be. And I mean, again, I love the concept. It's not readily available, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't look to that as a resource. And maybe some of these assisted living facilities look for you to be on a waiting list for a year or so where you're privately paying for that year. And then maybe you can get in on the waiting list. So it's something that, your listeners should definitely have in the back of their head as an opportunity to not necessarily have to jump to a nursing home if their family member doesn't have that higher skill level of care. They have that available to them.
I learned something new. I always like to learn something new, if not multiple things on the podcast. And we're recording in the morning, so I have the whole rest of the day. I can take it off. I learned something.
There you go.
That's fascinating. But okay, so we talk about putting the house in a trust, easy, no life estate.
No life estate.
Talk about putting cash assets in a trust, that's going back to the very beginning of our discussion. That's the emotional part.
Yeah.
That's what they feel. I don't want to ask my kids for money. And that's what you typically hear.
Yeah.
And as you said, I'm asking them for money today. With money, I'm giving them back to replace it.
Right.
What kind of access do the kids have to the money in the trust?
So the way that we write those trusts in our office is the parent, who's known as the grantor, can name what we call a lifetime beneficiary. And so the lifetime beneficiary can have access to the principal and the income in the trust. And that way the money can go out to the children. And I often have this conversation because, you and I were chatting a little bit in advance, and I was explaining in a different concept that we oftentimes get asked very specific questions. And in very specific questions, there's not always a right and wrong answer. It's what works for you. So when a client says to me, well, how much money should I keep in my name? Would I like for them, depending on whether they're single or they're a couple, would I like for them to stay between the $50,000 and $100,000 range? Yeah, probably, because at the end of the day, I could easily get them on Medicaid after any penalty expires from transfers, which I'll explain in a second. But the answer is really, what do they feel they need to not feel destitute, to not feel like they're begging their kids to support them? Some people, it might be $200,000 because and they know if I keep that money in my name, because Medicaid is an extension of me, that money might be exposed to my long-term care costs. And I say might because there's always exclusions and exceptions to the rules, which is why you speak to an elder law attorney, why you make sure you go to somebody who has the right knowledge and can talk to you about all of the different things that are available and the exceptions to the rules. But at the end of the day, it's your preference. If someone has $500,000 in their name and they really only want to protect the house because that's their comfort, they don't want to give up control of the money, that's not a wrong answer.
Right.
Because that's what's comfortable for them.
You're not maximizing the benefit of what you're doing.
Right.
But it makes them comfortable.
Exactly. And always, always, always the biggest thing that someone should make sure that they have is a very comprehensive power of attorney. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with the fact that a power of attorney is a legal document that allows you to name somebody to step in and handle your financial affairs. If you don't have a very comprehensive power of attorney, like it allows unlimited gifting and it gives permission for somebody to essentially just step into your shoes, if you don't have that, you stifle the ability of an elder law attorney to, even in a crisis where you're 1 foot in a hospital, 1 foot in a nursing home, you stifle them from being able to protect something.
Hi, I'm Larry.
And I'm Ben. We're the father and son team of Leave the Key Homebuyers, and we want to buy your house.
We specialize in working with seniors who are transitioning out of their homes, and we understand what you were going through.
So if you're considering selling your home and would like an alternative to the traditional overwhelming process, reach out and see how we can help.
Do you have an outdated home?
No need to update anything.
Have a home that needs repairs?
Don't bother with repairs.
Don't want to take everything with you?
Leave whatever you want behind.
Dreading the headaches that come with agents?
Sell your home without paying a commission.
Dreading prying neighbors attending open houses and passing judgment on your home?
No need for public showings.
When you sell to us, you'll have all the certainty of closing on your timeline, not someone else's, and there's absolutely no pressure.
Visit leavethekey.com or call us today for a no-obligation offer at 631-388-7771 if you want to sell your home today.
Did I hear they came out with a new one a few years ago?
June of 2021 is the most recent one. It doesn't necessarily invalidate the ones that were signed prior, but it's like everything else. It's always easier to deal with financial institutions when you have the most recent one because that's the one they're being trained on. Less questions get asked.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Is the new one since June 21 more comprehensive than the one prior, or just new?
It is not, depending on, in my office, no, they're both as comprehensive,
Okay.
They're comparable. There's little nuances in them. One in particular is that under New York state law, under the power of attorney law, the power of attorney prior to June of 21 had a blanket statement that you were giving permission for somebody to gift more than $500 total. That was charities and children alike. And the new June 21 says $5,000. In my office, though, regardless, we would make it unlimited. So it didn't change that for us.
And my parents had the typical A through R, whatever it was, or all the above.
Yes.
Is that
And so letter I
Right.
in that list of the A through P.
P? Okay, that's close.
Yeah, you're
okay.
close. The list of the A through P, letter I is the section, is one of the things that changed in June. Really, the change of that document was because the prior document had so many sections that needed to be initialed or not initialed in order for it to be incorporated, that people were thinking they had an incredibly good comprehensive document, and because they didn't initial things, they didn't. So they tried to simplify the form to make it a little bit easier for individuals to do. But we're talking legal documents like that. Again, you're penny wise, pound foolish. Right. Yes, you can download those things from the internet, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be comprehensive.
Right.
And downloading it is going to be in its simplest form and may restrict you only to $5,000 total in a year.
Right.
So in my example,
Is that $5,000 per person or total?
Total.
That's
total.
Crazy. That's crazy.
So when like a husband and wife come into me and one of them needs care, any kind of care, Medicaid paying for home care or Medicaid paying for a nursing home, and they have assets in their name, if the spouse that needs the care is incompetent and they don't have a power of attorney that allows for more than the $5,000,
right.
We're in a position where if, depending on the asset, like if it's the house and we need to move the value of the house, we're in a position where we have to maybe go to a guardianship to get permission to move that. You can transfer, it is, and you can transfer assets between spouses in the Medicaid world and not suffer a penalty for that. So just to clarify, because I've mentioned this word penalty a couple of times.
And use the word audit.
And I use the word audit. I will clarify that. So it's actually all in the same
that's what I figured.
Description. Yeah. So in a nursing home, it happens in a home care scenario also. For home care right now, even though the law on the books has changed, it has not been implemented as of yet. The home care, they generally will look 3 months back so that they can do retroactive coverage 3 months back. They don't have to look at 3 months, but we often give 3 months so that we might be able to get retroactive coverage. In a nursing home, it is 60 months or 5 years. That's why you hear us talk about 5 years so much in this world. What is that audit? It is basically just that. It is taking every single bank, every page of every single bank statement.
Every single one?
Every single one.
Good.
And it is taking every financial statement and going line by line to see where did the money come from, where did the money go. And Medicaid often, when I started this, they looked at $1,000 or more. Now they're trending to $3,000 or more, but they look at every deposit regardless of how much it is.
I want to think deposit. I just think outgo.
No, and I'm glad that you said that. Yeah. The reason why they look at deposits in excess of income. And the reason why they don't restrict deposits to only over a certain amount is because people have stock, and people who have stock get dividends. Oh. And oftentimes dividends could come in like $20, $25, and they don't realize it. So my grandmother had to be in a nursing home for the last 6 weeks of her life. It was not safe anymore for her to be home. And my aunt had her documents, so I had my office do the audit and the application. And I was explaining to my aunt that she has to have stock, and because she was getting stuff from MetLife. And my aunt said, no, she doesn't have stock. She just has the life insurance policy. And I said, I'm telling you, she has stock. She's getting these dividends. No, that the dividends are coming from the life insurance. And I had to explain to her and teach her that what happened back in the day, companies like Prudential and like MetLife, when they went public on the stock market, there was an option issued to life insurance holders where they can either have shares of stock in the company or they can get the buyout.
My own family, my father had MetLife stock for that reason.
Right. And so most people just let it ride and kept the stock and didn't take the buyout. And they're getting dividends. They think in terms of their life insurance policy. But my grandmother had stock that ended up being about $4,000 worth of stock. And when we're talking about Medicaid has rules about assets that you can have and the income you can have. So the current year, you can have roughly a little more than $32,000 of assets. So that $4,000 of stock counts against the $32,000.
That's a large percentage.
Correct.
More than 10%. Yeah.
Correct. So you need to understand that. And so in the audit, Medicaid looks at not only what income you have coming in, because there might be stock out there that you don't realize. They also look at what gifts you've made. So I had a gentleman once pay for his 6 months before he was going on Medicaid nursing home. He paid for his daughter's wedding. There were big money transactions going out. So they might say, all right, there's $5,000 here. It's going to, your daughter. And Medicaid says, okay, that's great that you gave a gift to your daughter, but you should have anticipated that you were going to need a nursing home, and therefore we're going to penalize you. So what is the penalty? When the audit is done of the 60 months, Medicaid the caseworker keeps track of all of the transactions that they feel are under the guideline of gift. Those transactions, they add up and they get a number at the end of it. When they get that number, every year there is a memo that goes out from the Department of Health, and that memo is an indication of what is the average cost of nursing home care in your region. Nassau and Suffolk are one region, and they tend to be, unfortunately, the highest, although one year New York City was the highest. So the average right now is roughly $15,000. So what they do is in that audit, when they get that number of what gifts they feel were made, they divide that gift number by $15,000, and that's how many months Medicaid will not cover the cost of your care. So when we started our conversation and you said, everybody thinks the government wants your money, everybody thinks the government's going to own your house, they don't. But if those transfers happen, then what happens is the value of that transfer gets divided by the regional rate, and that regional rate then determines how many months Medicaid just won't cover the care.
Correct. So your money's going to the nursing home in this example, not to the government.
Correct.
As many times I tried to explain this to people, no, you're wrong. The government's taking my money.
No.
The government doesn't want your money.
The government is a payer of last resort. So they're basically saying, you had it, get it back, pay for your care before we pay.
Right. Ask the caterer for the money back because you paid for the wedding.
Right. I mean, thankfully in that example, because the dad paid directly to the caterer, Medicaid did not count it as a penalty because it is customary for a dad to want to pay for a daughter's wedding.
What happens if it was a child? I wonder if it was a son.
I think that they would have considered it even for a son because the social breakdown that would have happened if that came out that they didn't allow for that would have been because clearly in the Medicaid world, paying for your child's wedding is not trying to get rid of money in anticipation of Medicaid. You know, the audit that they're doing is really to say, well, you kind of knew you were sick, and so you were trying to divest your assets. Yeah. So
get married quickly. I need to give you money. I need to pay for your wedding. Make it an expensive one.
So as we're talking about, preparing for Medicaid, the one big takeaway is that you don't touch retirement accounts.
Right.
So your IRA, 401k, the things that you have set aside from after you were working and you put money aside and didn't pay tax on that, those stay in your name because Medicaid has a carve out for them that you can go on Medicaid, and this 32,000 number that I was telling you about, that number doesn't include those assets as long that you do have to do something with those assets to make them an income source. But generally speaking, those are exempt from the calculation of the 32,000 you're allowed because, again, there was some lobbying done and this concept of having, if you touch that, it gets taxed.
Right.
And that would be a huge burden for somebody.
So you have to do something to generate income from those.
You have to do.
I assume minimum distribution is sufficient?
So it is not sufficient.
Wow,
I'm glad you said that. So the minimum distribution is an IRS rule.
You're making me look bad in front of everybody.
No, you're asking the good questions.
I'm kidding.
So the minimum distribution is an IRS rule.
Correct.
It is what you're required to take once you turn 73. They've upped it over the last couple of years. Medicaid's not as generous. The IRS basically is letting you live an their life expectancy tables that they use for that distribution makes you live a long life so that somebody will inherit that asset from you. Social Security is the table that Medicaid uses to calculate the distribution. They're not as generous. They don't want you to leave a legacy of your IRA. So when you're looking for Medicaid, not now, don't do it now. You only do it when you're getting ready to file an application. Your elder law attorney will tell you what the calculation should be, and then you just take a little bit more out of your IRA, and it becomes an income source. Instead of going in the asset column of the assessment, it goes in the income column.
But now you have two issues when applying for Medicaid. There's an asset-based issue and an income-based issue.
There's actually, depending on what you're applying for, there could be a third.
Oh, go ahead.
So in the home care world, there's also whether or not you have the care needs for the service.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
So they do, after they do the financial assessment, they also assess you to determine whether or not you physically need the care. But coming back to your question, there's an asset and there's an income. So things like your Social Security payment, your pension payment, the required minimum distribution, which you have to maximize for your retirement accounts, all of those are an income source.
Right.
In the Medicaid world, for home care, the income this year is $1,820. For nursing home right now, it's still only $50. I sit on the executive committee for the New York State Bar Association, and we are constantly trying to get them to change that number because it's a little archaic to only get $50 a month, even in a nursing home.
Explain what that means, 'cause I'm not sure everybody knows.
So the $50 a month is an allowance, basically, that you're entitled to out of your income, which could be used for incidentals like going to the beauty parlor, replacing clothes, as your clothes starts to get you outgrow it, or your shoes get a little holey, or
Right.
It often happens sometimes that somebody might lose some of their clothes. It got misplaced. To replace that kind of stuff, you have to have funds to do that, and they give you $50 a month toward that kind of stuff.
Out of all the income you earn,
Correct.
you have to use your income for your own care. You're allowed to keep $50 out of your income, and then Medicaid makes up the shortfall.
Difference, yes.
And that's what it is. But you're saying that's for a nursing home, and the thinking is, how much money do you need when you live in a nursing home?
Correct.
But $50 is getting your hair done once. You said it's $50 a week or a month?
A month.
A month. Well, if you get your hair done this month, you can maybe actually go to a movie or something next month, or buy a pair. You can't buy a pair of shoes.
Right.
If you're 80, your shoes aren't $50.
Right.
Unless you're wearing a pair of Skechers. Right. But orthopedic shoes don't cost that.
That's why we're advocating. I mean, it's
It's
still going to take some time on that, but at some point, somebody will recognize that $50 a month. Even just to get your hair done, think about it. Cost of living, the beautician has to make her money, his or her money. So, but home care, you get $1,820 a month.
And that you're getting more, but you're maintaining your home.
You're maintaining your home.
Which you can't do here for taxes are $1,000 a month on Long Island.
Correct.
So you're $1,000, how much you said?
$820.
So you got $820 to support the rest of your house and your lifestyle, if you will.
Put food on your table, clothes on your back, and keep the roof over your head.
And keep the place warm.
Yep.
Yeah.
There are things that can be done, though, in the community world, where there is a concept of something called a pooled income trust. And that is a trust that is very specifically done with a not-for-profit. There are about 23 not-for-profits in New York that are approved by the Department of Health for this purpose. And you take that excess income, give it to the not-for-profit, and then bills of yours can be given to the not-for-profit, and they will pay your bills with your money up to the money you put in. Okay. So if you give them $1,000 and you have a cable bill, you could give them the cable bill. They'll pay the cable bill out of your $1,000.
So if you have $2,800 a month coming in, you give $1,000 to the nonprofit, you're still on your $1,800 limit.
But you
and
still
the
have
nonprofit's paying some of your home. You can now have heat.
Correct. You still have the opportunity to pay your expenses, which is what a lot of people on Long Island do, because that's how you stay in your home and can afford it.
Right. Does the $1,800, that's regionally specific? Or is that national?
That is New York.
Okay. So,
So
if you're upstate New
everything we're
York.
talking about is New York.
So if I'm in the middle of whatever, upstate New York,
It's still 1,800.
and my taxes are $800 a year instead of $1,000 a month, I'm still getting $1,800 a month to live on.
Correct.
That's what the heat's more expensive. It's very cold, but it doesn't make up for the taxes. That's interesting. I thought it was going to be more downstate, upstate. No. Okay.
No, it's not. And the asset threshold in that test is 30. It's a little over 32,000
Right.
that you're allowed to keep in your name and still qualify for Medicaid, which is huge advocacy that we are at that number, because when I started in this practice 24 years ago, it was $3,500.
Wow.
So, and we, over the last couple of years, we made huge. In 2008, it jumped up to 13,000, and then very recently, in the last couple of years, it went from 16 to 30. So we were excited about that, because it gives people, like your example of needing heat and stuff like that. If I can have $32,000 in my name,
Right.
and I'm staying home for home care, that gives an opportunity for me to be able to use those resources to keep me home and paying for the heat and stuff like that.
Okay. So we have a lot of steps so far. So we've covered dealing with your house and dealing with your assets. We're now talking about your income, and we're talking about the look back period.
Correct.
What other things do we have to pay attention to?
I mean, you always want to pay attention to making sure that you have a comprehensive plan, because all of those things are great, but I come back to you need the power of attorney for it, in case something happens to you. And there's always exceptions to the rules, that you should always contact an elder law attorney for those exceptions. Like I mentioned before, spousal transfers, there's that exception. Understand that New York is different. The Medicaid program is a program that is unique to New York, but it is a national program. So there is a baseline of what every state has, and then beyond the baseline, every state has other things that they add to it and put with it. So this 32,000 is definitely a New York number. The other thing that's definitely a New York thing and not necessarily in other states is the concept of spousal refusal, which is the ability to transfer assets to a spouse and say, as the well spouse, I'm not going to make my income and assets available to my sick spouse so that Medicaid will consider them.
I remember hearing that when I was in the financial world. It was incomprehensible to me.
Some states are, contrary to spousal refusal, they're spend down states, which means roughly a well spouse is allowed roughly $150,000 in assets, and a spend down state, you have to spend your assets down on your spouse until you get to that point, and then they will be considered for Medicaid. So we're lucky here in New York.
Shocking. It's very seldom do you make that comment.
I know.
And so the problem with the spouse refusal, it gives people almost an excuse to postpone.
It does. But I'll tell you, and I alluded to it before, if people are postponing with that as their planning option, they're gamblers.
Especially, you're talking about a 5-year look back.
Yeah, they're gamblers. And I have had a number of scenarios. I don't do a lot of guardianship. That's, we split in our office the different things that we each are experts in. But I have had an opportunity to do some guardianship. And I actually, in a matter of months, had 2 cases where it was husband and wife in both cases. Actually, it was the wife that was sick in both cases. No, there was no power of attorney or anything, like no planning in place. And yes, you can transfer to a spouse, but in one case, there was a vacation home, and the vacation home makes the spouse ineligible. And in the other case, there were assets, and we needed to move the assets. And the only way we could do it was a guardianship, because there was, yes, we could transfer to a spouse, but without the power of attorney. In both cases, the wife was in a comatose state, so they couldn't participate in the conversation or in the transfers. And we were in a guardianship asking the court for permission for the husband to receive the assets so we could take advantage of the things that are available in New York.
Wow. So don't rely on that. And
Don't rely on that.
You heard what I said. People use this as an excuse.
Yeah.
Not a reason. It's an excuse. It's not a good plan.
I would rather somebody planning in advance, and then if there is a scenario where they don't get through the 5 years and suddenly something major happens, we can pivot and still protect things, then not make any effort. I think one of the things people don't understand, even in a case with a husband and a wife where they could both participate in the crisis, if you're transferring assets, you wait for one spouse to get sick, you transfer the assets to the well spouse, the sick spouse gets on Medicaid. You've turned a 5-year window into more of a 7-year window because you had to wait for your sick spouse to get the care from Medicaid, get approved, before you can then start planning for the well spouse, and then there's 5 years on that.
And spouses are typically similar ages, and it's not a good plan.
Yes.
It is not a good plan.
So I always encourage, start now,
Yep.
do the 5 years now, because if you can get through the 5 years, it's 5 years and you're both protected instead of waiting for a crisis and then having to plan for the other one.
And I have one other question about the trust, and this came up in a previous podcast about actually accessing money in the trust. Is there any way, any kosher way, to get assets out of a trust? For instance, you used your example. You're the grantor. I'm the beneficiary. I take the money out of the trust for my benefit, but I paid $10,000 out of my own pocket for you. Could I take $10,000 out of the trust now to reimburse myself?
So that's that lifetime beneficiary example that I gave you. And as a lifetime beneficiary, so I'm an attorney, so
Yes.
I go very technical. Correct. So the only way you as the trustee can take or as the beneficiary can take the money out is if you're, one, named as a lifetime beneficiary, and two, you have permission. You're either the trustee with permission to self-deal, or there's another trustee out there that has permission to give it to you.
Okay.
But yes, there's absolutely, that's one of the things we make sure is there so that if you get caught in the 5 years, we have a way of dealing with things.
Right. So you're not stuck where if your kids don't have the kind of money they need to take care of mom or dad, they can still use the money in the trust to take care of mom or dad, sort of indirectly, if you will. They can't take out $10,000.
Triangle.
It's like the Bermuda Triangle.
Go in circles and never dollar for dollar.
Trust to kid to something else for your benefit. It can't go from this way. You got to get
There's no straight line to that. Correct. It's got to go in a roundabout.
Once mom and dad understand that they're not really burdening their kids financially, and the money still could be used for their benefit in a legal triangle, we'll use that word again, it makes it more appealing. The part that they can't get past often is that they have to ask the kids to do it. Correct. And in my wife's family, they put money in a trust, and my wife and son and brother-in-law deal with their finances. And there's no problem. A lot depends on your relationship with your kids.
I think the other thing absolutely, and that goes to what I was just going to say. The other thing that people need to realize is when they establish this kind of trust, in my office, even though you're giving up access to the asset, we set you up in a way as the creator of the trust, the grantor. You still have the right to manage the trustees, which means if you're not happy with something that your child is doing as a trustee, you can fire them and put somebody else in. Yep. You can't put yourself in, but you can put somebody else in. And
a more friendly trustee.
We also give them the authority, as long as they have capacity to do it, to change the ultimate beneficiary. So because this is such a heavy conversation, and you have to find ways with clients to shed light on the fact that they have the ability to do so much stuff and they still control so much stuff. I often joke with clients that yes, you're putting your assets in the trust and no, you can't pull it back for yourself, but you still have the right to say to your kids, behave or I'm going to disinherit you.
That's right.
Because you maintain control over who the ultimate beneficiary is and you're maintaining that right. So it's not a set it and forget it that you can't change it.
Right.
It's a set it and forget it that we're protecting it for your long-term care costs.
Correct. That's perfect. Excellent comment. I want to sit there and say, is there anything else we need to cover before I'm going to ask you my key question?
I think we're good.
Okay. And that is, what's the biggest, I know in my head what the answer is. What's the biggest takeaway? If someone would want to get the best benefit out of this podcast in a minute, what would that biggest takeaway be?
Something is always better than nothing. You should definitely have the conversation and don't be afraid to start planning.
Right. And I was going to say now.
Yep.
Now. It's never too late.
To plan.
Well, let me rephrase that. It's never too early.
To start
Let me rephrase it. It's never too early. It can be too late. So without a doubt, this was excellent. There's actually a few things I picked up. I've covered this topic, well, peripheral topics, trusts and so on. And I'm always learning something. And I come from 30 years in the financial world. And first of all, things change.
Absolutely.
Number one. And number two is it's a dynamic industry. And my clients are very homogeneous. So my focus was very limited. But I'm always learning things. And I hope people listening to today are learning things as well, because there's so much information out there. But whatever you do, pay attention, start doing things now if you haven't done them already.
Yeah.
And if you've done them already, it's not bad I didn't even review them.
To review them, absolutely. And don't be afraid to go to the expert.
Yeah.
I know that we're in an AI world.
Yeah.
It's taking over. I do have people come in and say things to me about, oh, but AI said this. There's a reason why we're experts.
Yes.
And the internet is a phenomenal tool, but it doesn't always pinpoint things based solely on your particular scenario.
Right.
And it also, your answer from an AI perspective depends on how you ask the question. And an elder law attorney is going to ask you more questions to give you a more finite, specific plan that works for you.
An elder law attorney is also part therapist.
We have a very keen connection to the social work world because, like we said at the beginning, there is a very real person on the other side of things that we are planning for, and there's an emotional component to that. I mean, I have broken down and cried with many a client because it hits home in some of the stuff that they're going through. And
you said there's a very real person on the other side. I won't interrupt you, but that'd be bad protocol. So I'm going to respond now. There's also, as a customer, there's a very real person on the other side too, and that's you as opposed to AI. There's the antithesis of a very real person. So this is a very real person activity, and you need real people on both sides. You can't rely on AI. You can't rely on doing your own research. You can't rely on LegalZoom and so on. That's fine if you need a quick something or other, but for a comprehensive planning, you don't want to be back to what we said before, penny wise and pound foolish. So I think that's a perfect ending to this. It was a really, really interesting podcast. I thank you so much. And I have a question. How do people get hold of you?
So if they want to reach out on our website, it's VJ Russo, RUSSO Law, LAW.com. Or if they have questions and they want to call the office, it's 516-683-1717.
I thank you so much. Please get hold of her. You're clearly not only an expert in your field, but I feel the compassion as I'm speaking with you. You've done this a long time, and you seem to care about what you're doing. And I'm listening to the enthusiasm, and I'm watching your eyes and everything. It's such a part of your DNA at this point.
It absolutely is.
So I thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Very good.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Unlocking Senior Resources podcast by Leave the Key. If you've enjoyed this episode or found it helpful, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast. We specialize in working with seniors who are transitioning out of their homes, and we understand what you are going through. So if you are considering selling your home and would like an alternative to the traditional overwhelming process, reach out to see how we can help. When working with us,
You can sell your home in its current condition. There is no need to remove unwanted items. And you control when the house is sold, along with so many other advantages. Visit leavethekey.com or call us at 631-388-7771 to learn more about our senior home buying process.